Launching poll. You guys thought that we weren't going to play little games. Give you a few seconds to vote. Which one is a lie about... Bill, you have a new hashtag. I didn't create it. There's actually quite a few hashtags. Some of them are really good. Uber Bill.
Uber Bill? All right. Take it.
Which one about Uber Bill is a lie? He built and drove race cars. He played drums and toured with a punk band. I think that's supposed to be a punk band.
Yeah.
Or he was a hair model. Giving some folks time to vote. For my LinkedIn folks, you guys can just put it in the comments. Which one do you think is a lie about hashtag Uber Bill, which is Bill who you're looking at right now. He built and drove race cars, pretty badass. He played drums and toured with a punk band. He was a hair model. So excited to have you, Bill.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
All right, let's get the party going. All right, LinkedIn people, what do you guys think? Doug Wolf in the house. I'm so excited to see you, Doug. You've been my new best friend lately. David Bell from Lean Staffing. Welcome. Ilana, I see you, girl. Good having you back. Robert, hi. All right, Bill. I'm looking at the polling right now, and it looks like 52% so far. They think it was a lie that you were a hair model, but I'm looking at your hair right now. I think you were.
Yeah, I mean, that's that. I thought maybe flash the hair a little bit.
And let's see, other people, they believe that you drove race cars and you built them, and they believe that you played drums and toured with a punk band. Which one is a lie, Bill?
The hair model is a lie.
It is? Aw, darn. I was thinking the race cars.
Yeah. No, my first career was gonna be a race car engineer. So
really,
all in. Yeah, I was all in.
Like, okay, so have you truly raced a race car? Like,
I have. So it was rally cars. So it's like 4-wheel drive, driving down dirt roads in the middle of the forest, going over jumps, driving in the snow, all different conditions. Yeah.
Have you ever been hurt?
I jammed a finger once in a crash. But that's about, because they all have roll cages, and so if you...
Yeah, it looks dangerous though, and I'll tell you that as a lawyer, to jam a finger is like the end of the world for us. Like, that's all we have is our head and our keyboard.
What do you do? Well, as a drummer, too.
Oh, that's true. So what punk band did you tour with?
So we opened for a lot of notice. So I actually opened for Blink-182 once, and opened for Green Day way back. This was mid-90s. Yeah. We toured with a band called Strung Out, which is a little less known. But the band I was in is called Family Values. So
wow. Yeah. All right, you're a man after my heart. And okay, Doug Wolf says, why do you race? Car racing. Wow.
I don't anymore. Still do track days, but just it's awesome. That's why.
Oh, that's really cool. Well,
going 120 miles per hour down a narrow dirt road, jumping in a car, sliding it around corners.
Have you ever been to the Porsche racetracks? They actually have, like, there's one in Atlanta.
I have not, no, but those look pretty cool. Yeah, every time you fly into Atlanta, you see it right there.
Yeah.
Right by the airport.
You can have a corporate meeting. The Uber people who are from Uber that are on this show are going to love me saying this. If you're in Atlanta and you need to have a meeting, you can have a corporate meeting at their headquarters right there in Atlanta, and then also race around the track too. And like, if you have a meeting, you can see the whole track while you are in the meeting. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Maybe post-COVID.
Yeah. COVID, that's not our life. So, okay, so Bill, introduce, for those of you who have had your head in the sand a bit, and then you just joined MadGaines Live, wondering what she was up to today, and you have never looked on social media or any of my emails. Bill, could you introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. So, Bill Drieger, I run operations for Uber Freight and helped start Uber Freight back in late 2016. I have a long history in the industry, actually. So after trying race cars, my next job was actually Frito-Lay and Pepsi in operations. So I had some exposure to transportation and operations while there, helped design production systems, that sort of thing. And then I was the 4th employee at Coyote Logistics. So helped Coyote Logistics for 8 years and really got the
Good
exposure
lord.
to the brokerage industry. And that's really when the idea of like an Uber Freight or a more streamlined technology platform really started to incubate. So I've been in the industry since 2006 now. Yeah.
Mhm. And what was the biggest, if you can even remember, what was your biggest surprise when you went from working for a shipper? I love asking shippers this question. I love asking brokers this question. When you went to working for a shipper and then going over to working for Coyote.
Yeah, and I was actually on the other side of the table at Amazon as well. So I spent 2 years at Amazon, and I was on the other side of the table there as a shipper. So I've kind of gone
Back and
back
forth.
and forth. Um, yeah, I think from a shipper side, it's I think understanding the constraints of the carrier and broker isn't it's you don't quite get that because when you're on the shipper side, sometimes the problem is a little bit abstracted, meaning that you kind of got your routing guide, you've got your RFP, the freight gets tendered out, you hand it to a broker and it kind of disappears. As where when you're in the broker, you really understand the complexities and the difficulties and how volatile the market can be and all the kind of like all the challenges day to day, just being a driver and a carrier in the market. And I think sometimes as a shipper, it's easy to get a little bit disconnected from that. So I think
Yes.
that's one big difference that I saw.
Yeah, that's well said. And we hear that a lot from our shippers as well. And it's one shipper interestingly told me that he was surprised about how he had to learn quickly when he went from working for a broker. Then he went to work for a big shipper. He was surprised how much he had to stay focused on safety versus in the
Yes.
brokerage world, that's more the carrier's job.
Hmm.
And I thought that was pretty interesting too. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
all right, so let's hit these topics hard. I have,
All
for
right.
those of you who still had your head in the sand a little bit, and I can see people are still trickling in. We got good groups. We got Troy, Yusuko. It's nice to see you here. And we got Jason Chandler's holding down the house over on LinkedIn. Hi, Anthony. So here's our agenda today, you guys. We're going to talk a little bit about the future of Uber Freight after layoffs and some of the announcements that we've seen in the news. We're going to talk about pricing strategy and some of the dramatic statements
Mhm.
that we've seen and heard.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about new products and also the existing products because we're all tech nerds at Madtropolis and we love to talk about tech. And then anybody has questions, sprinkle them in, and I'll keep an eye on things along the side and on LinkedIn. For those of you who are on Facebook and YouTube, know that it's a little harder for me to respond to you guys. So come on over to Zoom or to LinkedIn. That makes it easier. So, Bill, I'm going to hit you right away with the big question. You have two big main topics that we're hearing, and we're very excited to have you, mainly because you're a disruptor, and we are too. And there tends to be a lot of haters when you're a disruptor. And I hear a lot of buzzing around what's the future of Uber Freight. Recently, there have been some news articles that have come out talking about layoffs, about how Uber's going to pull back on the funding for the trucking side of the business. And we're going to be real because this is MadGaines. Some of your competitors have just been dancing on the grave and celebrating. And yeah, they failed, la, la, la. And I'm like, did they? What's Bill going to say about this topic?
Yeah, it's interesting because it was like one little line in a Wall Street Journal article,
Yep.
which was kind of imprecise in the wording. And then immediately there's like three articles. There's our competitors are posting blog posts about the imminent downfall
Yes.
of Uber Freight. So I would say, yes, the rumors of our demise are grossly overstated. Uh, so Uber, entering this year, Uber had a lot of positive momentum and then kind of COVID hit, right? So I think we've been public with the impact of the core business on Uber. We saw up to an 80% drop in rides, which we're now kind of on the other side of that and starting to see signs of life and recovery. But for Uber as a whole, like Uber is still like we are part of Uber, so all of our funding and it all comes from Central. And so Uber did go through a round of layoffs, really primarily impacted by the rides business, because outside of that, if you look at Eats and Freight, we're either up or level, or this from a business perspective, it's still still not in the same spot that rides is.
Right.
But Uber had to go through a series of layoffs. We as Freight contributed to those layoffs, not to the same level, but ultimately what we saw as an opportunity, as part of Uber, we are building profitable business. Uber's on a path to profitability, and we had to help in that path as well. In terms of actual impact to the business, though, there was no impact to service or investment in tech. We continue to operate at 100%. Our customers saw no impact in terms of service or coverage or cost. A lot of, as we look to the future, internally, a lot of our focus is on automation and just improving the core technology. And so some of that was just driven by accelerating the future a little bit and taking advantage of opportunities to just improve our core business and make it all a little tighter.
How did you decide, and maybe this is an inappropriate question, you can just dance around it if it is, but how did you decide what to do about layoffs? Because what I've been reading and what I've known, because I have a lot of friends that work at Uber as well, and it seems like you guys have been growing fast. And usually when a company grows really fast, it's the opposites. You don't want to have to lay off people. And so I thought maybe your product was developing and efficiencies might have been gained and that offered you the ability to run leaner, but I was just guessing, basically.
Yeah, no, that's there's definitely truth to that assumption. When we launched Uber, the intent was always, or Uber Freight, the intent was always to build the most efficient execution platform. And when we initially launched our tech, it was very carrier focused, and that a carrier, all of a sudden a carrier could download the app, hit a button, and book it. And so our efficiency and our ability to drive efficiency on the booking side, we saw that benefit right away, and that we had this lever we could pull, and we had this platform. All of a sudden, 2 a.m. carriers are logging in, booking loads, and nobody's on the phone. It's all just happening magically. And then since then, we've made significant investments in tech. It continues to evolve. We're able to kind of yield those benefits. And for a shipper, that means all of a sudden, they can do things instantly, and carriers can do things instantly. But internally, right, that also means we have operations efficiency. So as we looked at these events and kind of where we are, there's definitely operations efficiencies that we realized internally that we had maybe not realized yet. We'd made the investment and we had a lever we could pull. But it's unfortunate nobody wants to go through these sorts of events. We are still in growth mode. Yeah. But the other thing is, like, when we transitioned, we built this platform. It's all cloud-based. When we transitioned kind of post-COVID, we were able to go work from home overnight as well, because it was all cloud-based. We didn't have any need to be in the office.
I heard you say that carriers can download the app and boom, they can see where their freight is. And then I'm assuming that's where you get visibility into where the carrier is as well.
Yes. So, I mean, I think that's the big shift. One of the big fundamental shifts that allowed Uber Freight to exist is this, that everybody's got a smartphone, right? It's got GPS. And I think how we interact with that phone in terms of allowing ourselves to be tracked and the GPS data, that's all kind of, evolved rapidly over the last 10 years, but ultimately the carrier downloads the app, they hit accept, and we know where they are. If they log in, they're looking for a load, right? And if they've allowed us to see their visibility, we know where they are. All that information is extremely valuable in just understanding the market, understanding liquidity day-to-day, understanding truck-to-load ratios in real time, right? Being able to make pricing and coverage decisions and how we think about the market. So,
have carriers been accepting to that? Because this, I went on 2 weeks ago, I went on like an eBOL rant. I mean, every show I was talking about electronic bill ladings, touchless bill ladings. Why can't carriers just use an app? And most people were like, Cassandra, you're boring us to death. But then carriers would surface and tell me that, hell no, over my dead body, am I going to download some app where you know where I am, blah, blah, blah. How have you guys been battling that? Is it easier because you have the big name?
Well,
or is it
still
as hard as the rest of the industry?
Yeah, I mean, we saw a huge acceleration, I think, versus pretty much anyone else in the market because we are Uber. So we have over 650,000 downloads. So there's definitely a large mass of carriers that want that access. And I think if you look across the industry, and this is true for shippers and carriers, there's always your early adopters who are really excited about the tech and they want to try it and they know the Uber name and they're like interested in the disruption or what's new. So I think that population is going to be a little more open to, sure, I'll just do it all through the app. I don't, if it attracts me, that's great because then I don't have to get on the phone. But then you always have your traditional population, which is, well, I still want to get on the phone. I still want to have that interaction. But when you got 3.5 million drivers in the market, you've got pretty large segments in each of those. So the fact that we have 650,000 drivers on the platform means that there's obviously a strong demand for it. And I think ever since the beginning, that's the one thing we saw was very strong product market fit of the core carrier application, because all of a sudden carriers had new information, they had new capabilities. One of the things I love to talk about is the fact that carriers book loads 24/7, which they never could do before. We were the first ones where a carrier could log in at 2 a.m. and book a load and not have to call anybody. And that does change how you operate in the market. And so I think with that, yeah, there's an understanding that if I use the app, then I also, because there are carriers that say, yeah, I don't ever want to get a phone call, right? I'm fine.
I always wonder, I've asked carriers that. I'm like, okay, do you prefer a broker to call you every like 30 minutes? Why don't you just use the app? The calls are annoying and distracting for driving too.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a population of carriers that don't want to get the calls. They just prefer to do it through the app. They just want it simple, right? And we're kind of used to a world where things are just easy and I can do it through my app or I can do it online. Particularly drivers that have grown up in that environment are just digital native and expect that everything should be online. For them, it's just, of course, I just want to go to the app, hit the button.
Yeah, make it easy. I got a little off track there, but let's navigate back to the future of Uber Freight. So after that headline where you guys were the demise of Uber Freight. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry to all those people listening.
No, we're still here.
They're still here, and they seem like they're doing well. What's next? How do you continue to grow, continue to meet your goals with like the rest of the industry? We're all getting restricted in many different ways. What's the plan?
Yeah, so when we came to market, it was interesting launching Uber Freight in the early days because we didn't have the tech yet. And so we've always been super tech focused. And as I look to the future, it becomes more and more tech driven. And I think this year we've really started to see that transition. And so for Uber Freight, we're investing heavily in tech, as we touched on, right? And where I see that really starting to shift on the carrier side, I think it's pretty far along, and that carriers are using the application, they're engaging. They understand what this offers and the value. On the shipper side, it's really the last year that I've seen this started to shift, and particularly around, I've talked a lot lately about our API and the fact that shippers can now go on the TMS, they can get an instant price, they can book a load, they can do all that, again, without picking up the phone, which is a new capability. And I see that going into 2021 and beyond really evolving and changing how shippers think about going to market, how they think about pricing and engaging with carriers. So for Uber Freight,
Bill?
What?
Full truckload?
Yeah, it's all full truckload.
Okay, just curious, because some people say that, and then I'm like, but you're running LTL, and that's full truckload's a big deal.
Yeah, no, for LTL, it's been around for a long time because you've got tariffs and you've got, it's all fixed prices, right? With truckload, we're the first that had a pricing API and a TMS, and it's different. It's a whole, and shippers aren't all used to that idea yet that I can just go and get a pricing API.
Interesting. It's going to take, I can tell that some of the shippers, when we've talked about electronic bill of ladings and we've talked about, hey, shippers, in order for us to grow as an industry, we also need you shippers to incorporate our technology as transportation providers. And surprisingly, some shippers are slower to adopt that technology, or they have to navigate through so much red tape.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge industry, and it just takes time for these sorts of technology shifts to kind of make their way through I mean, TMS as a platform was invented, and they started coming to market in the late 90s, and you still have shippers that are implementing their first TMS, right? We still work with shippers that they don't have a TMS platform, it's still all spreadsheets, and they're just thinking about putting in their new TMS. So there's definitely a long tail where I used to tell an anecdote back from my day at Coyote, where I remember going to a shipper in probably the mid 2000s, where they had, we went into their office, and on each desk you could see 4 holes. And I said, what are those holes for? Well, we had the typewriters mounted there. We just took them out last week. Right? And so tech, there's a long tail in this industry where there's always a few stalwarts who are going to take a call. Yeah.
And I can imagine that it's difficult for a lot of shippers because they're working in the transportation industry, but not for a transportation company. So I hear a lot that they're the last department to be invested in to drive initiatives. So it's definitely so interesting to get that perspective.
Yeah, the budget's often not there for tech.
It's not. And it's kind of cool too because we don't have a chance to learn a lot about shippers. And with this platform, we have had that chance, and we hope to continue to unite the three groups, and many more groups, actually. I shouldn't say three. So let's talk about this pricing strategy. I hear this a lot. I can tell, let's be real for a minute. When I announced that you were going to come on this show, I had a bunch of people come to me and they messaged me or texted me and said, I'm not following you anymore, Cassandra. Uber's evil. They're ruining our entire industry. They're undercutting brokers. They're just ruining everything in the world. I hear that a lot because I'm a disruptor as well. And many people who follow the show are also disruptors. We hear about this, but it seems to be a very strong sentiment in our industry with the undercutting. And I think it's time that we have you address your perspective, since I don't know how many people have stopped and asked you, hey, we're all talking trash behind your back. What's really going on? What really is your strategy? Because I highly doubt I'll be honest, Bill, when I looked at your background, I thought to myself, man, this guy's going to get roasted if this is his first time in the freight industry. And then I looked at your background. I'm like, oh, no. He's well rehearsed in our industry, which to me means you care about the future of our industry too.
Yeah.
You've been on both sides and through it for years. I highly doubt Bill's sitting in executive meetings saying, let's undercut every single broker. Let's just cut, run everything at a loss, take over the industry, fuck everybody all up, and damn the industry. But maybe that is. Bill, is that your executive meeting? Is that your...
That was not the thesis behind Uber. No, we did not. Uber Freight, yeah. We did not get investments to go lose money. Definitely.
And so talk to me about, what are your talking points when you hear all this grumbling?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely heard it all. So yeah, it's not we hear those objections, but I mean, when we're talking to shippers, we don't hear that. It typically, I think, comes from competitors and others in the market.
And you Madtropolis people who are rolling their eyes or challenging him on that point, you all have heard the shippers come on our show and talk about sometimes pricing's all we care about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Y'all have heard that. So go ahead. Sorry, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, it's so
eye rolling, and I'm like,
yeah, I'll touch a few points. So one, just to acknowledge, it's a competitive, mature marketplace. So we have to come and price competitively. We are also a for-profit business, so like everybody, we have to make money. So we want to price at a level where we know we can make money. We are operating a more efficient back end, so we don't have some of the same OpEx costs that a traditional carrier would or broker would when we execute freight. And the intent when we came to market, I mean, I'm been in this industry for a while. I got excited about joining Uber because I knew that Uber would have the ability to invest in technology and build up a more efficient platform. And I knew there are very few places that would be able to just really drive the future. And going back to
the market was going as well. Do you remember, like back in 2012? I think I worked for Global Trends briefly, but I kept hearing like, we're the Uber of freight, Uber of freight, and it was where everybody was trying to go.
When we started Uber Freight, I went back and tried to count how many companies had launched that had Uber for Freight in their in their material or on the website, and I counted 45 companies that had started up calling themselves Uber Freight. So it was a very hot area from 2012 and we launched in 2016. So in those 4 years, 10 companies a year were launching as the Uber for Freight, and the first one goes all the way back to 2012. So it's not a concept that we invented, but I'd been thinking about this since 2012, 13 as well. And a lot of people in the industry had been thinking about it. And I think when we started as Uber Freight though, immediately, I think from shippers particularly, there was this recognition, okay, well, if Uber is going to get in this market, then I need to talk to Uber. And I had a lot of conversations with VPs of shippers and directors who told me the same story, which was when Uber launched and the first time I used it, I immediately thought, well, why can't I do this for trucks? Why can't I just order a truck and get a price instantly and see and why can't I have that same simple experience for trucks? And I think a lot of people understood that. And when we started Uber Freight, that's what we wanted to build, is that instant availability of information, the instant execution, ease of use, the reliability that you get with Uber, the flexibility, all the things that have changed how we think about getting around personally to be able to do that in freight. So from a pricing perspective, though, getting back to, I know we kind of got off the pricing question, but the intent was always like, we want to price competitively. We don't want to be the low cost leader, right? We were building what we believe is a better product, better value, and ultimately shippers and carriers see that. The one thing that's very different in our approach to market is we've been much more transparent with prices, and we were the first where a carrier could see the price on every single load. From a carrier perspective, all of a sudden then that means I have options, right? If Uber has a price at 600, I can, they may still go to another broker and say, hey, I've got this. Uber's saying this. Can you beat this? We know that can happen in the market, and it is a mature, competitive market. And same on the shipper side. And so when we price on either side, we're trying to price at a fair, competitive rate. That's the fundamentals. And I do believe if you talk to shippers, if you talk to carriers, I mean, the carriers will respond very much to what's going on in the market, but on a long horizon, if you talk to them both, I think you'll find that our prices are fair and competitive and at market. Or
is undercutting part of the strategy, though?
Not undercutting. No, there's no.
Just curious.
There's no undercutting.
You guys do undercut. Like, I've seen it. Everybody's seen it, and there's a lot of. I don't think that's part of. It's probably not. Well, you said it's not part of your strategy.
Yeah.
But it is something that has rippled across our industry over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if we're pricing, if we're at a competitive situation and we price and the price is lower, it's because it's a price we think we can make money at, and we think the market will bear that price.
And for those of you out there who are like, what the hell, Bill, rah, 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 don't forget that, I mean, we're still in a competitive marketplace. So let's, we got to remember that too, folks.
Yeah, we are still a very small percentage, fraction of the market. So no single provider. Yeah.
Huh.
I mean, our revenue numbers are public, so you can see the prior.
Yeah, I saw maybe a couple weeks ago, I saw something about how your 99% of your revenue is paid to carriers. Do you remember that? Is that not true? I never know.
I can't comment specifically on that, but I think that was an article from I think that was, I know what you're referring to. I think it was a couple of years back. Somebody published a note, but.
Is a majority of your revenue paid out to carriers, which basically means you're just running at cost?
The typical margin in this industry for mature brokers anywhere in the 10 to 15% in terms of what. So for any broker, the majority goes back to the carrier as a total. But I can't comment on the specific margins. But we definitely, anytime we price out, the intention is to have a positive margin.
Okay, so you're pricing competitive. You're not going out of business. Look at all this stuff we're battling today.
Yeah.
Your strategy is not to undercut everybody and destroy our utter industry. You're not Dr. Evil in executive meetings. I feel like we're getting a lot done today. So let's move on because, well, hold on. Let me just make sure. I'm paying attention. Okay, so let's keep plugging along to my favorite topic, which is your products. What's going on with the tech? Where are you going? And let's start with automated freight matching. And I think that's a big portion of your tech, but I am still a lawyer and not all of the tech.
Yeah, actually, that's an interesting point because when we came to market, previously everybody said they're the Uber for freight, which we touched on. When we came to market, a new term got invented very quickly, which was digital freight matching.
Yes.
So digital freight matching.
I have to hear that.
I've never been a big fan of that term for a couple of reasons. One is digital just sounds old. Like you wouldn't say Google is a digital search company, right? It sounds a little dated. But to the freight matching piece, it is a small part of the marketplace functionality. I'd say it's not the more complicated part of the functionality. The more pricing is the much more complicated part of the functionality versus if you think about just core marketplace tech. And when I talk about marketplace, I mean the technology that makes the market actually work. Meaning if we put a load in front of a carrier, is it at a price that's competitive and that they will take it? And are we getting it to the right carrier is the matching part. But the matching part is somewhat easier when you know a carrier is logging in and they're in San Francisco. They're gonna want freight right around them, or they may tell us then that, hey, I really want freight in Fresno, because I'm going to be there tomorrow. So let's look in Fresno. And then that's just a search, and then they see the load options. And the more interesting part on top of that is that we also have bundling. So we launched bundling this year, which is more route building. And so we've built out a lot of tech now where a carrier can log in, they can see 3, 4, 2, 3, 4 loads linked together as a route. They can make sense of that as a
Smart.
yeah. And carriers love it because now they've got higher revenue guarantee effectively that I can link these loads together. We've seen it significantly reduce the deadhead for those loads because we're able to smartly kind of pair them together based on timing and distance. And that's, I think, where some of the more interesting matching tech. So the core just, are you matching a carrier with a load? That stuff that's kind of baseline, and then we build up from there in terms of the freight technology. But the pricing is definitely the harder part because all of our pricing is automated on the carrier side. Those prices, they're dynamically generated, and they can vary based on market conditions. They can vary based on time to cover.
So you guys actually will show the pricing versus a carrier having to bid.
Yes, carriers can bid on our platform, but there's always an upfront price. And the interesting thing about that is we allow bidding. It's not on 100% of lanes. It's on the lanes where we may not have as much activity. The pricing is maybe not as apparent, but certain markets, like say a local Dallas haul, I'm just going across Dallas, it's very liquid, it's well known. It's easy to just price that and put a price out. But something else, like say if I'm going from Montana to Florida, where don't have a lot of information, not sure which carriers might want to participate, it makes more sense to allow for bidding.
So if a carrier goes into the app, sees these lanes, sees the pricing, accepts, decides this is what I'm going to do, which is a great feature. They have to keep the app on their phone. That way you can track their location, right? What is how have carriers been doing with adopting that? And what's the backup method if you guys have track and trace teams just in case they aren't using the phone, or they're doing in my past experience where they would turn the phone off, or they would just basically turn the phone off, remove the app all the time. So
yeah, we still have people, and tracking is still, I'd say, an industry challenge to get perfect resolution on tracking because carriers will turn their phone off, or whatever device there's some way that in some circumstance where it won't work or won't give you a signal. So we do still have people that we still have an operations team, and we still, people matter, right? And relationships still do matter. And our objective is we want to spend more time on the relationships and more time on the important touch points and less time on the transactional touch points. So we will pick up the phone and call if we don't. We do still have a coverage team. So you asked the question of what percent of loads are on the platform. Well, the vast majority, without giving a specific number, the vast majority are covered automatically. But there are markets where we may not have liquidity, where we need to just call the carriers in the market and get them, reach out and be proactive about that. And same as where if we don't have a tracking read or a driver went off the grid, we have to pick up the phone as well and reach out.
Which happens. So I see a couple of messages coming through from my shippers, and they're saying, what about us? So we've been talking a lot about carriers and visibility and their ability to see all the lanes. What have you been offering to shippers on the shipper side of the business?
Yeah. And when we started, we were very carrier focused early on in terms of driving carrier value, building the carrier application. And then as we entered 2018 and had this marketplace that was working, we're seeing that it was reliable, and we started to open it up more to shippers. And so on the shipper side, our first product that we launched was the shipper platform, which was really targeted more towards smaller shippers so that they could log in and immediately get a rate, build a load, manage their business in one place. And our objective again was, how do we simplify that? How do we make it easier? And what new information can we provide to them that they may not otherwise have access to? So we launched facility ratings. We were first to market and led with the idea that a driver can rate a facility. And it's actually been hugely valuable to shippers because they have their customers and they have their suppliers as well. So it's not just about their facilities. They can also then see their whole network.
That's amazing. So carriers are on that app. They can see the different ratings for the different locations, and
Yes, yes. And it does influence their decisions. But we've always felt, again, that transparency, if we would rather them look at a 3-star facility and still make the decision based on reviews, because that then should reflect in the price, right, and the coverage rates on those loads, than for them to not know and to show up. It's always worse for the shipper and the carrier. The carrier shows up and don't knows what they're getting into.
Yes,
So
it's very frustrating.
yeah, so it's better to have that transparency. And most, almost across the board, most shippers, they want that information. And either they already know it and they'll say, I know it's like a poor facility, it's in a bad part, it's been there for 20 years, it's weird lot or funny entry, or it's in the middle of a neighborhood, and it's just, we know that, we're trying to shift it, we just got to make do for now, in which case they accept that carriers aren't going to love it, but they may have to pay a little more, or may just have to, there is some impact. Or they don't know, in which case I've seen shippers get on, sending emails in real time, like, wait, what? Why is this facility 3.2 stars? And they make changes, and we've actually engaged with.
I was just thinking that. I'm like, I wonder how that works when your customers are really angry. Your shippers are very angry about their facility getting crappy ratings, and they don't even believe in it. They're like, "There's nothing wrong with that facility. These guys are being paid."
Yeah, I've not been in a meeting where a shipper said, "No, I don't want to know." Right? They want to know, good or bad. Everybody wants to know because they want to get better rates. They want to improve, right? They just want to understand what the challenges are. The other big thing on shippers, so we launched the shipper platform, and then that was really targeted towards small shippers. But then with our big shippers, we've been launched this year. We've seen a huge acceleration in the use of pricing APIs, and this is where, again, a shipper can go in. And today we have integrations with SAP, with BlueJ, with Oracle. Really, we're kind of building out this ecosystem of partners, because one of the challenges being a tech company and working with shippers is, for the most part, they've already solved their tech problems. If they're a big multinational shipper, they've already got their TMS, their ERP, they installed it back in 2000. And it's the problem is abstracted. It's doing its job, so they don't need to make changes. But what we've been able to do is there always are those early adopter shippers who are looking for the new thing, the next new thing. And that's where we found initial groundswell of interest in real-time APIs. Because what it allows them to do is the initial benefit, there's a couple of benefits, but one is I no longer have to go through this spot process where I'm sending emails, or I've got a spot board that I have to monitor and wait for responses. I can do all this instantaneously, and then I can start to automate it, right? And then I can react faster. I can typically get better rates, because particularly if you've got a load you got to cover in 4 hours, you don't want to have to start sending emails or even pick up the phone, because every little delay means a truck is disappearing out of the market, right? Mm-hmm. You want to do that instantly. So there's definitely a lot of value the shorter the horizon, but even for longer horizon, you're taking steps out of the process. And what we found is there's a pricing difference, even day 2 days out, you can see a notable price difference depending on response time. If you take 2 hours longer to get a load covered, you may be $10, $15 more expensive. So depending on the market, and if it's a really tight market, you start to see that curve accelerate. So responsiveness does matter in terms of just getting pricing and getting results, but also it starts to open up all different ways of thinking about your business, because now you can plan, like you can get an instant price, you can make a plan. Maybe you're thinking about, I could ship this Monday, Tuesday, or I could source it from Dallas or Seattle. And if I can, and maybe I could do that before by using published rates or my RFP rates, but those rates aren't good anymore. Now I can get an instant rate and make decisions. So
yeah. So I guess a beginner question, but how much do you feel you can automate? You've worked for a brokerage for a long time. You understand our industry. Yeah. How much of a broker's job can you automate?
It's a good question. We believe we can automate the majority of the transactional pieces. So within our own ecosystem, the booking, we've automated the majority of the booking, the majority of the load building. We're well on our way with scheduling. So these big tasks, and tracking is another one where the majority is automated. But there's always going to be the long tail of exceptions, or the loads that are just more complex. And conditions change, and oftentimes you have to react in real time to, like right now, particularly with all the volatility in the market, there's got to be some oversight and responsiveness. But we do believe the majority of the transactional pieces can be automated. So bucketing that out, on the shipper side, you've got the pricing side, which with their APIs is almost all automated today. So you've got the pricing side, and then past that, then you've got load tendering and acceptance, and most of that is automated. Meaning the shipper, and a lot of these pieces were automated in different ways before, but the areas that were not automated was the booking and the pricing. But EDI has been around for a long time. So tenders come over, they get accepted automatically, load gets built automatically. Then ideally the load gets scheduled automatically. Then it gets posted automatically. Then the driver books it without a touch, right? And then they track themselves. And so we've done tens of thousands of loads, which are totally touchless. And then as we look across each of those work streams, our goal is how much of that can we automate? But there's always got to be somebody on the back end that can manage that.
Yeah. As a leader, how do you battle the fear of a potential job depletion when you're continuously automating? And you could say that you're a leader for your company, you're also a leader in our industry as well, which I'm sure you hear that a lot. Like, you can't automate my job, blah, 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 blah. Disruptors will get that kind of pushback. How have you been battling that type of conversation or trying to point out a different perspective?
Yeah, so internally, so I think there's two sides. So within Uber Freight, we are still growing at a healthy pace, and so there's lots of opportunities to kind of think about how we do that over time. It is, as an industry as a whole, this is something where, like any industry, we're not the only disruptors, or we're not the only ones kind of driving change, right? So I can't say we're the only people out there that are driving a lot of these pieces, and we may be the first on some, but there's there's several companies out there that are right behind or out front on other things, and right. So change is definitely coming in the markets is the first thing I'd say. Every time there is major change, you typically see new jobs get created, new opportunities, and I do think fundamentally what's going to happen is you'll see new types of engagements with shippers and carriers break out. I particularly think there's a lot of innovative kind of software solutions and higher order kind of managerial types of tasks, which will be created that don't exist right now. I think as pricing becomes fully automated, the way shippers think about going to market can become a lot more dynamic, which has its own challenges, which requires its own decision-making, which requires a whole nother layer of thought behind it. I do think that, there are parts of this market which have been inefficient for a long time, and so we just need to rethink those and
it's so funny, Bill, because I'll tell people, I'll be like, what are you guys bitching about? Because you hate scheduling, you hate the back and forth emails, you hate that part of your job that these companies who are leading the charge are trying to eliminate, which means you get to spend more time doing the part of the job you enjoy, which is servicing of a client. And
yeah, I mean, it's definitely a tough question. I think what we've seen internally is, the busy work gets automated and the higher order tasks remain. And so to your point, like a lot of, we have a lot of exceptional, we definitely hired very strong general talent that can do a lot of things. And we have a pretty high bar in terms of bringing employees in. So with our team, we know that our team has a lot of flexibility in terms of, like, if you take away the busy work, they're going to do more and more value add work as well.
I love that. And that's what shippers are looking for those of you listening that are common Madtropolis listeners. We've heard continuously from shippers. We will ask shippers from a carrier and a broker perspective, as a carrier or a broker, hey, shipper, how do we be unique? How do we do better? And shippers consistently come back and say, know your freight extremely well. Know my freight better than I know my freight.
Yeah.
That's the first one. Or number two is build yourself into an expert, into a niche in our industry. But no matter what, they're looking for brokers and carriers to be experts on moving their freight.
Yes.
How do you do that? You get the hell out of the minutia of the day-to-day and start driving the higher level decisions and improve efficiencies that way. That's at least
I would advise anybody, you always want to be in front of this curve rather than behind, in the sense that you want to be educating yourself around how things are changing, like what technologies come to market, how it can be used, and then there will always be new opportunities. And I think a lot of what we can't predict now, which I'm excited for in 10 years, is once all these new capabilities and this real-time freight and instant everything has been percolated throughout the market, I do think there's going to be all sorts of new startup ideas or new interesting layering of other technologies on top of that. So
why do you think it took us so long to get to this point? You did a lot of research, I think back in 2014, and wrote a thesis on this, but I'm constantly baffled. I thought that back in 2012 when we started talking about being the Uber of the freight and digital matching and blah blah blah, I thought we'd be there in like 2 or 3 years, and here we sit. We're not. We're getting there.
Yeah.
Um, but what do you think has been the biggest setback for our industry? Why we're not more
Yeah,
fluent?
I think the challenge is it's not an industry that historically has attracted large investment. If you look at other industries of similar size and kind of the relative investment in tech, and part of that is because it is a very competitive industry and highly fragmented. So individual players oftentimes can't make the sort of investments or shifts. I also think it takes time, right? In an industry like this, it just takes time to make that shift. Part of the reason, again, I was so excited like for Uber to be getting in is that I knew that it was a company that would have the resources to be able to push over the hump, because a lot of what we saw, like when I really started seeing the magic in our model was when I saw loads get bounced and rebooked in like 30 seconds. And when I started seeing stuff booking overnight, right? And that to make that happen though, we needed a lot of freight, we needed great tech, and we had to kind of get up that curve to get there. And I think a lot of the challenge for the early startups is that you won't see that magic if you have 10 million in freight or even 20 million. It's such a big market. You need a lot of volume to make the marketplace work, to make the magic happen. And all the benefits we're seeing, like today I can look at the network and every day there's just these incredible anecdotes of loads, recovering. We see this high reliability within the network, which took time to build up. As it gets denser, there's these network effects that play out. And so I think the challenge is it's such a big market. It does take a big push to get to a point where you can really prove out the benefits of these tools.
And a great example of that is the electronic bill latings.
Yeah.
Because we talk about this, I won't let this go ever, Bill. We talk about this, and I try to get, some of my shows I've had shippers, carriers, and brokers, and we all fight over how to implement. Simple thing. Why do we have these old bill latings, and we don't even need them anymore from a legal perspective? This contracts govern everything now. And why can't we get actually, I'll say 4 parties. We can't get, it's a hard time getting shippers because they have to adopt the tech. Carriers have to adopt the tech. Drivers have to adopt the tech, and then brokers too. So it's hard to get all 4 to come together. And I think that further evidences what you're saying.
Well, yeah, and it's one of those problems that everybody recognizes and would like to change, but it's not clear. I do think it will take a consortium, and I'm very eager. This is something we've talked about internally quite a bit, and eager to think about how we can partner across providers to do this, because I do think everybody's got to come to the table, and it's got to be a little more open. And it's one of those things where everybody would benefit. It would just make the industry better. I think the number one reason why you haven't seen this change yet is it's because everybody that is trying to come up with this as a product can't figure out where's the money, right? How can I make money? That's why I think it's one of those solutions where we need to work together, come up with a standard and be more open in implementation. I think there's an opportunity I think there's a few parts of our business that are like that, where there's just busy work that's created because everybody's doing it independently. It's not clear that somebody could build a solution just to address it, but if everybody agreed that there should be a standard and we can work towards it, then there's an opportunity to make a more efficient marketplace. Because I agree that the BOL processing, I would guess there's tens of millions, or not hundreds of millions of dollars just managing that process and handling paperwork.
Yeah.
And particularly, I saw more interest in this with COVID because there was the infection risk of handling paperwork around.
Absolutely.
And so we did see some shippers that tried to move to kind of partial, or you take a picture or the limit handling of it, tried to limit the touches of the BOL, but without fully embracing the eBOL.
Yep.
So it's it's definitely an area where I think there's an opportunity for innovation.
I think, Bill, I get so obsessed with the BOL because it's not about the electronic BOL. To me, it's more about how do we unite this industry? Everybody's so siloed in the way they operate. How do we unite this industry? Because once we unite and we get a process in place for the electronic bill lading, it just opens the door for so much more we could unite on and become more efficient. I mean, some of this stuff that we talk about on our shows is so old.
Yeah.
just so old. And I think also that's why people come out of the woodwork bashing on Uber is because they're terrified of the disruptor coming in and changing our very old world.
Yeah. That's,
It
I mean,
makes
it's a super
sense.
fragmented industry and it's hard to get everybody kind of lined up. And yeah, there's always these, like I mentioned earlier, there's these pockets that are just kind of been doing the same way for 20 years. So
Mhm.
uh,
I
always,
tell you that I just saw a couple people ping me and they said, um, could Bill tell us the key takeaway from a shipper's perspective? What's the difference between like why would I pick Uber over my traditional brokerage that I normally use? And oh shit, this is gonna cause a fire. But this is your opportunity to come on the show and talk about your company.
yeah.
So you get to be the spotlight. So
Yeah. So I'd say a couple things. One is that we are definitely leading in technology and trying to bring technology and more efficiency to the market. And with that, we do have a market which is highly reliable. We are able to price very competitively. So as a shipper, you typically first you care about price and service. And so we are certainly very highly competitive in price and service. I would put us up against anyone because the tech allows us to do that in a much more automated way. Beyond that, we are very much driving the frontier in terms of new technology, new capabilities for shippers. So there's a lot of things you get with Uber Freight that you just can't get elsewhere. The pricing API and integration being one of the most obvious, where we've been leading with that and the first to market. And so that means as a shipper, all of a sudden, again, you have new capabilities, you have new information, and we continue to push that boundary. And so facility ratings, right, the shipper platform, the pricing APIs, all these are tools that, as a tech leader, are unique and that we continue to push forward. And also just fundamentally, like we want to partner with companies that do want to change the industry and have an open conversation around where we can drive improvement and how we can use technology to do that. And so we are approaching the market, I think, fundamentally differently. Our mission has been how we empower and enable our communities of shippers
yeah.
and carry and
So if you can talk about this, I'm passionate on two topics in our industry besides electronic bill ladings.
yeah.
One is cargo claims and carrier vetting. I carrier vetting. I've been talking to a couple companies about automating carrier vetting,
Yes.
something that I'm very, very passionate about because it's very hard to properly vet a motor carrier. It is not something that's easy and it creates a lot of data points.
Yeah.
Sometimes hundreds of data points. Are you guys there yet with automating your carrier selection? If you can talk about it, or is it like in the pipeline or
Yeah, I can talk about it because
selfish?
I talked about areas that we have very automated. This is one area where I'd say the more rigorous you are, the harder it is to automate in the sense that there's kind of a
Absolutely.
trade-off there. And so we have tried to set a very high standard for carriers and quality on the platform because ultimately that determines our quality. As an intermediary, right, your carriers are your
The safety
lifeblood.
data points link highly to performance, to the
Yes.
carrier's performance.
Yes.
It really does. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
And we have a large pool. We have over 65,000 carriers on the platform now, and we biased very heavily towards small carriers, so owner operators and smaller carriers. And if you know, right, in terms of safety scores and ratings, oftentimes you find more that maybe aren't rated yet in the smaller pool because they're new carriers.
80% are.
Yeah, but what we also find is that pool of carriers is also in general higher quality because when you have only one truck and one load, every single load matters and you're very focused on every single load. And so we find we have a strong pool of these small business owners. But I agree that like fully automating that process is something that we're definitely very focused on. We do have carriers come through that are totally touchless. So we have that happy path built out. And
Happy path.
yeah,
I like
I think that's more of a product or engineering term. Talk about what's the happy path, right? So we do have carriers that go through that happy path and get on board with no touches. But
that's beautiful.
it's something that we continue to kind of push as
Yeah,
well.
it's hard.
Yeah, it is. And then it's not just because quality is both the initial filter, make sure you've got good carriers coming onto the platform, but the ongoing monitoring and compliance. And,
Oh God, speaking to my heart.
yeah.
Yes, yes. Once you can't just drop them and not monitor them anymore when you bring them in, which is a
Mhm.
common issue. I want to hear something interesting. I forgot to tell you this. You have employed with you the most famous um, cargo claims adjuster
Mr.
in
Olson?
expert. Yes, he is incredibly famous in Madtropolis and incredibly loved.
We love Chris, and I see him on the, I see he's listening, so
Here,
you
and
can bask in the, the
and
praise.
I'll tell you that he's, he's incredibly passionate about cargo claims, and I've never had the opportunity to ask him because usually we're talking about. I'm going to be real. Usually we're nerding it out on cargo claim law.
Mhm.
But I've never had the chance to ask him. Can a shipper see? Do they have visibility into cargo claims in your tech, or is that in the pipeline?
It's that process is still.
I know it's not as exciting as sexy as the other.
Yes. But there's definitely opportunity to make that significantly more automated.
You hear that, Chris Olson? We have opportunity.
Yes.
Okay, so
Chris is in my ear quite often, so I know he's
he's probably rolling his eyes at me.
we're
Like,
writing this down. Bill said,
yes, he's like on Wednesday, June 5th. Okay, so we have 4 minutes left with you. Let me just, if you don't mind, I don't know if you can see the questions and answers. I've been so engrossed with you. I haven't had a chance. Someone did say that you have amazing hair, by the way.
oh, well, thank you. Not model worthy, so.
But that okay, so this is interesting. I like Todd's question. Answer live. Ooh, what does that mean? Okay, so he asked what your biggest challenge has been throughout the entire pandemic at Uber Freight, which is a good question. Not as
Yeah.
exciting as cargo claims.
I mean, to be frank, I would say it's like keeping our team rallied and focused, and because moving to work from home, you go through the challenge of you're not with people day to day. You can't read the room, right? And so I think that's a challenge. I'd say our team has been exceptional in that we've actually we haven't seen any drop off. Everybody's been rallied. Everybody's been focused. But that COVID plus all the events over the last couple of weeks with George Floyd and all the tragedy associated with that, I think all of that just compounds and has made it a very difficult working environment and to kind of understand the mood of the team. I'd say that's been the biggest. From a pure ops perspective and reacting, I feel like we were built for this in the sense that we were able to go work from home overnight. Our systems are highly automated, so we were able to respond very quickly to what's going on in the market. And I think that's where we definitely succeed and show our strengths in volatile periods like this. And I think our team did step up and showed the grit and really rallied. But at the same time, as a leader and as a manager, I know for my team, keeping the team and just making sure that we're listening and being open and accessible and having those same channels and over communicating. We've definitely had to over communicate and try to be as visible as possible in times like this, just to make sure that everybody's feeling heard and everybody's feeling present and everybody's still engaged and rallied.
It's interesting you say that because Shelley Simpson said the same exact thing last week, which was over communication, stay on top of the communication, and let the people know that they are being heard. I think that also this illuminates the importance of staying ahead of the curve, like you had said, because there were and are still a lot of companies out there who have the belief that their employees should be butts in the seat where I can see them work. And if you stay within that realm of thought, this is a time where you'll get left behind in our industry, for sure. And let me just double check. The rest of the questions, quite a few of them, you're going to laugh, are around your pricing. And
all right. If I haven't addressed it, I'm happy to.
All right, let's do this. We have 2 more minutes.
Okay.
Here's what I want to do. So one thing that I heard about, let's go back to the undercutting and the pricing because I want to end this chatter. Because here's the thing about Madtropolis. I'm trying to unite leadership. I'm trying to unite the segments of our industry. And I want top performers. So the bitching at the competitors and being jealous of those who are disruptors doesn't sit well with me. I'm not saying that's going on here, but I'm saying that's why I'm sensitive. So let's end this once and for all. So I heard you say something earlier. You said that we can actually have better pricing because our tech allows us to do this. So are you undercutting, or is it your tech allows you to price competitively, or neither?
I'd say we price competitively. Until I go into a bid and win 100%, I have a hard time with the undercutting. I mean, typically we go into any bid And if it's a traditional RFP, like we're pricing to win some portion of that, but at a price that we think we can make money, we can make a good margin where we think it's fair, like relative to the market. And we don't come out of any bids where like a shipper tells us, hey, you were way under, or you were competitive on 100% of the lanes and you're going to bid, win the whole bid. It's a competitive market. So to summarize, it's a competitive market. We price competitively. We do not undercut. We don't go in to try to just discount, or because the other challenge is if you have a discounting strategy, it's very hard to shift later and adjust.
For sure.
If you're going into a shipper and pricing at a rate that you can't sustain, then one, you're going to compromise that shipper relationship down the road when you have to shift those rates.
Yeah. And I always tell my Madtropolis people, if you go in with a discount mentality with your pricing, you're going to get what you pay for, which means cargo claims, performance issues, blah, blah, blah. Not every time, but keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that at a high level, we have a very strong marketplace dynamics team who just obsesses around market rates and pricing and relative rates. And every time we go through a bidding event or a price, it's always, okay, what do we think the margin in the market is going to be now in 6 months? And so anytime we price, we're trying to be very thoughtful about, is it a sustainable rate? We think we can cover at this rate. Is it a rate that's like representative of the market? It is for us something that we invest quite heavily in. So and the challenge, I think, in any market like this where it's highly competitive is if you go into a bid, like if we go into a bid, maybe we came in third place on a bid. Well, and 2 people came below. But for those other 7 people, it looks like our rate was low, but there may have been 2 people lower, right? And maybe the market rate is that the second person, we're a little over the market rate, but there's always a pretty big spread in any given bid. Price, again, that's why pricing this market is very complicated. You'll see anywhere from, you see a pretty broad spread anytime you go into a bidding event. But our goal is never to be, like we don't want to be out of tolerance with what we think the rate should be. I know maybe it's an overly nuanced answer to what is a very simple question, which is, are we undercutting? The answer is no. But I think it's, having spent a lot of time developing pricing models and thinking about pricing in this market and going through RFPs, in practice, it's actually a very nuanced question. It's a very difficult question to answer precisely because bids are very
complicated. Define undercutting. Undercutting, to me, the term is more of a mentality and a purpose behind your actions, which has a little bit of malfeasance in it.
And I would definitely not agree with that 100%. That there's no we're not in this just to kind of buy share or to try to undercut everybody. We want to price at a rate. We always want to price at a rate that we think is competitive and sustainable, where we can purchase, right? That we can actually make a margin. So
makes sense to me. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Honestly, this was the fastest hour of my life, and I've learned a lot from you. And I have a feeling that you're gonna have some new followers and fans. I'll tell you that what we're gonna do is I'm gonna say thank you very, very much. I'm gonna pop you back into the audience. To my Madtropolis followers, be a Bill follower, send in messages if you have continued questions. And Bill, you are absolutely amazing. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great.